Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we've got a stack of historical records that honestly read less like an archive and more like an existential warning. We are going deep into the first contacts between the Galactic Assembly, this massive 12,000-cycle-old institution, and a species they thought was, well, completely insignificant: humanity.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We're going to dissect what might be the single greatest miscalculation in galactic history.
Right.
The Assembly looked at human ships, our lifespans, and just decided we were no threat. We're going through their own records to figure out what they missed and what power really means when your existence is on the line.
And that initial assessment, I mean, it is just brutal in how dismissive it is.
Oh, absolutely.
The Assembly's idea of strength was so clear-cut. You needed shields that could bend starlight. You needed fleets ready to go across multiple spiral arms.
And you needed to live for millennia. I mean, for them, time was basically an infinite resource.
And entrenched, stable power.
That's it, exactly. And against that checklist, humanity just didn't measure up at all. The sources are pretty blunt, describing us as, small, soft-bodied, frustratingly short-lived.
And emotionally chaotic. That was a big one for them.
A huge one. So the consensus was set. Humanity would be a footnote, protected by treaties, maybe useful for some minor trade.
They just assumed compliance.
And, for a while, it seemed like they were right. The first diplomatic meetings, the records say humans were surprisingly agreeable. They smiled, they listened, they asked all these detailed questions.
Which the Assembly filed under submission.
They totally did. They didn't see it for what it was.
Intelligence gathering?
Pure intelligence gathering. They mistook this intense curiosity for meekness, and that right there was the fatal flaw that let them drop their guard.
It wasn't just a personality clash either, was it? It was also about the tech.
It was technological arrogance. The Assembly loved elegant, uniform systems. They saw human tech, layered, mismatched, scavenged parts bolted on, and they just dismissed it as improvisation. Pretty much. They couldn't see that improvised systems are built to function, not to look pretty.
Which most of me, the silence that followed, just so jarring. Walk us through that. How did the illusion start to crack?
It started with a snap, just like that. Earth goes silent.
Okay.
And the official analysis, the Assembly's people chalked it up to some atmospheric interference and get this, a failure of those temporary human tech solutions.
It fit their bias perfectly. Of course their stuff broke.
Exactly, but then the silence starts to spread.
Right.
Luna stops responding. Then Mars. Now, you'd think an engineer would be worried, but the diplomats were still blaming solar flares, some localized problem.
Denial.
Total denial. It was only when 50 light years of human colonies all at once just vanished from the network that the data became undeniable. That wasn't a glitch. That was an organized deletion.
And then comes the real pivot point. The moment it goes from denial to just dread. And it's not an invasion fleet. It's a single cargo ship.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating is how physical the warning was. This black-holed ship just drifts into neutral space, engines cold, no signals, no beacons.
Nothing that could be a ghost signal or bad data.
Right. The message was purely material. One word, near the main airlock. Run!
And the source material really goes into detail on this, doesn't it?
It does. It wasn't painted on. It was carved deep. The records say the etching went through 3 full layers of the hull's armor.
Wow.
Think about the effort, the sheer desperation to physically scar a starship with one word instead of just sending a digital message. That's a testament to pure terror. And it immediately changed the problem for the Assembly from a technical one to an existential one.
The thing they were running from, of course, was the Devourers.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this enemy because they just didn't play by any of the Assembly's rules.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The Devourers were ancient. I mean, the sources describe them as older than recorded history, maybe older than most stars. They weren't a civilization. They were more like a law of nature.
And their whole goal was just consumption.
That's it. They didn't want territory or slaves. They wanted raw matter and energy. They'd strip a world clean, harvest the atmosphere, and then crack the planet open for its core resources.
So they weren't trying to conquer, just eat.
It was about thermodynamic efficiency, not politics, and that's the key to why those massive galactic empires fell so fast.
Because they were prepared for a war, not for and extermination.
Exactly. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not an enemy that just absorbs the attack, adapts instantly, and fires it right back at you. Their own weapons were turned against them.
They're just completely out of their depths.
Completely. The reports on the collapse all point to a psychological failure. Empires that had been around for 10,000 cycles were gone in days because they were just so certain. They thought they were too advanced, too ancient, too important to fall.
And when the Devourers turned toward human space, the Assembly probably wrote it off.
Oh, they expected it to be over in hours, maybe minutes.
But that's not what happened. The first engagement, near Jupiter, that's where the record shifts from dread to just total confusion.
It's an amazing contrast, right? The Devourers show up with their sleek, adaptive ships. And what do they find? Human ships that are
Rocky.
crude. You can see the welds. The armor is layered and scarred.
Built for a brawl, not a parade.
Absolutely. And they were using kinetic weapons, physical slugs. The Devourers must have been so dismissive.
And that dismissal lasted right up until Jupiter ignited.
Yeah. The humans knew they couldn't out-tech an enemy that nullified energy weapons, so they didn't. They weaponized the environment itself.
Okay, break that down. How do you weaponize a gas giant?
It's just a chilling level of strategic thinking. They'd already seeded Jupiter's atmosphere with fusion charges and these high-yield gravitational mines. They didn't hide behind the planet. They used the planet as the bomb.
So they detonated the mines.
All at once. It triggered this runaway fusion reaction in the planet's core, basically turning Jupiter into a temporary star. 3 full Devourer fleets just vanished. Gone. Consumed by plasma storms before their AI could even figure out what was happening. They were fighting a species that used planets as grenades.
And after that shock, you see this. Refusal to back down.
Total refusal. The galaxy loves a tactical retreat,
Yeah.
preserve your assets. But the human ships just kept advancing, firing, breaking apart, and when their weapons failed,
They just rammed them.
they rammed them. There's one report of a human ship basically dead in the water that sets a direct course for a Devourer command ship and just detonates its own reactor. A suicide bomb.
The Assembly must have thought they were insane.
It was beyond insane to them. It was an unyielding commitment to mutual destruction. They just couldn't process that.
So as this goes on, the Assembly's just bewildered, and they demand answers. And the human ambassador returns. She's described as scorched, exhausted.
And she doesn't ask for a single thing. No aid, no sympathy. She just offers them context.
This is where the death world philosophy comes in.
That's the term that enters the Galactic Dictionary.
So what does that actually mean in, practical terms for a war like this?
The ambassador basically explains that humans evolved on a planet where everything was actively trying to kill you. The air could be poison, the ground could tear itself apart.
You don't survive that by being strong in the Assembly's sense.
Not at all. She said you survive because you develop this deep evolutionary paranoia and a pathological refusal to stop, to just quit.
It's the complete opposite of the Assembly's values. They value stability. Humanity's strength came from chaos.
Exactly. And her quote, this is the heart of it all. She says, "We didn't survive because we were strong. We survived because we refused to stop."
Which raises a huge question, right? That if your enemy's main weapon is just pure resilience, how do you even model that? How do you fight someone who has already accepted losing everything?
You can't. The Assembly was planning a war over assets. Humanity was fighting for existence itself.
And that willingness to pay any price leads to the single most shocking decision in the whole record.
Scorching their own homeworld.
Yeah. The Devourers get to Earth orbit. And humanity. They don't just defend it. They systematically destroy it.
Oceans boiled. Cities glassed. They poisoned their own atmosphere. It wasn't defense. It was denial.
They weren't trying to kill the Devourers with it. They were trying to deny them the prize.
But the ultimate act of defiance. They turned Earth into a furnace. But it was all calculated. Evacuation fleets had already launched, carrying seeds, archives, DNA, and scattered in every direction.
So humanity didn't go extinct. They became a nomadic hunter species.
And the psychological shock to the Assembly must have been profound. Here's a species that values its future existence more than its entire history and civilization.
And their remaining forces. They transformed completely. Those ships became everything at once. Fortresses, factories, weapons.
And their whole engineering philosophy just flipped. They ignored all the sacred safety limits that other species used. They ran reactors hotter, drives faster.
Based on the idea that the ship might blow up next week, but the enemy has to die tomorrow.
Exactly. Every single day they survived past the safety margin was a win.
And their tactics got so much more aggressive.
Oh, totally. They started luring fleets into asteroid fields and then triggering gravitational collapses to just crush them. They started destabilizing stars on controlled timelines.
Which the assembly thought was impossible, right?
Their physicists couldn't even figure out how they were doing it. And then there are those reports of weapons that didn't destroy matter, but actually damaged space-time itself.
Tearing holes apart without an explosion.
Yeah. It just shows that their innovation was being fueled by pure, raw desperation. They were pushing tech way beyond any known limits.
And the losses were. They were catastrophic for humanity, but they just kept coming.
They studied every single defeat. They learned from every mistake, and they repaid every loss with interest. And that relentless pressure, it started to wear the Devourers down.
They weren't used to a foe that saw self-destruction as a valid strategic choice.
Not at all. The Devourers were winning battles, but the humans were slowing them down, grinding them to a halt. They were losing the war of attrition.
Which brings us to the end. The final move near a dying star, with the assembly just watching, helpless.
The human fleets are just a handful of ragged ships left. There's no retreat, no relief coming.
And the fine transmissions are just heartbreaking.
They're the most important data in the whole conflict, I think. Unencrypted, not meant for the assembly. They were for each other. They were saying goodbye.
But not with fear.
No, with messages of love, with jokes, with memories, with laughter, defiant laughter. They knew they were doomed, but they refused to be defeated.
So what did they do?
They chained their last few ships to the star's gravity well, locked themselves in place. As the Devourers moved in for the kill, they destabilized the star's core.
And held their position.
Held their position as the supernova erased everything, the Devourers, and the last of the human fleet. It was chosen mutual annihilation.
Just silence after that. The threat was gone, but the cost was absolute.
And years later, when those scattered human survivor fleets started coming back, everything had changed. The assembly saw those scars, the short lives, the aggressive tech, and they finally got it.
Strength wasn't about your armor or how old your empire was.
No, it was about how much you could lose and still keep going.
That one idea fundamentally rewrote galactic law.
It became the one unspoken, mandatory rule for everyone. Never, ever underestimate humans. Because if they're still standing, no matter how few, the fight is not over.
So if you connect all this back, the assembly's big failure was thinking stability and tradition meant strength. But the ultimate weapon against a consumer was a species willing to sacrifice everything it had to be consumed.
True strength, it turns out, really does come from vulnerability, from that radical commitment.
The assembly prized established, predictable power. So think about this. If humanity won by embracing total destruction and chaos, what powerful, stable empire from our own history would be the most vulnerable to an existential threat that just refuses to play by the rules? Think about that until next time.